how sometimes a deal that seems too good to be true actually is? Well, that's kind of the story we're getting into today. It's all about energy, global politics, and this one huge company that's gotten caught right in the middle of a massive geopolitical storm. Okay, so to really get what's going on, you just got to look at the numbers. I mean, this chart right here, it basically says it all. If you look back to early 2022, Russian oil was what, like 2% of India's crude imports? Barely anything. Now, it's jumped to over 35%. That is a massive, massive shift. And that's really the core of this whole thing. And it's why one specific company is suddenly under a huge global microscope. So you can see why this happened, right? For India, getting all this discounted Russian oil, it was like a massive economic gift, a way to fuel its enormous economy and, take care of over 1 billion people. But gifts like this, they almost always come with strings attached. And in this case, those strings are pulling India into a really tricky geopolitical tug-of-war. All right, so who is at the heart of all this drama? It's a company called Nayara Energy. Now, if you're in India, you've absolutely seen their petrol pumps. They're everywhere. We're talking about a real giant in the Indian energy world. And when I say giant, I'm not kidding. Nayara runs the second largest refinery in all of India. Think about this. It can process 20 million tons of oil a year. That's a staggering amount. It makes up 8% of the entire country's refining capacity, and it all flows out through nearly 7,000 petrol pumps. So yeah, it's a super critical part of India's whole energy setup. But here's the twist in the tale. This Indian giant, it has a very deep and now very, very complicated Russian connection. And this right here is where the whole story just gets wild. Okay, so this is where that whole Indian giant thing gets, well, complicated. Take a look at who actually owns the company. It's surprising. More than 98% is controlled by just two groups, Rosneft and a fund called Kesani. And guess what? Both are tied directly to Russia. The original Indian founders, they're left with less than 2%. So even though it's operating in India, its ownership is almost entirely Russian. And let's be super clear about who Rosneft is. This isn't just some random company. It is Russia's single largest oil producer, and it's majority owned by the Russian government. That direct link to the state, that's the key. That's why everything is getting so messy. So because of that government ownership, Nayara is now facing what you could only call death by 1,000 cuts. The European Union has basically unleashed the storm of sanctions. The whole point is to squeeze Russia by going after its most valuable assets outside the country. And Nayara is right in the crosshairs. The EU's game plan here is hitting them from all sides. First, they've basically frozen Rosneft's assets. That means they can't sell off their nearly $10 billion stake. Second, Nayara itself is banned from selling its refined oil and gas to anyone in the EU. Third, and this is a big one, they're strangling their shipping. They're telling ships they could be barred from EU ports or lose their insurance if they work with Nayara. And then to top it all off, they're cutting off access to things like software and industrial parts. It's a full-on economic siege. Now, as you can probably guess, this has not gone over well. It's creating some serious diplomatic heat. The Indian government came out and officially condemned the sanctions, pretty much accusing the EU of having double standards and messing with their ability to trade for energy. And are these sanctions actually working? Well, yeah, they're having a real, measurable impact. You can see it right here. That massive refinery we talked about, it's now only running at about 70 to 80% of its capacity. For an asset that important, that's a huge drop. But hold on, that 70 to 80% number, it becomes truly mind-boggling when you realize that just a few months back, the refinery was running at over 100% capacity. It was going full tilt. So to see a drop that sharp, like falling off a cliff, it just shows you how hard this economic squeeze is hitting them where it hurts. And the problems don't stop with production numbers. The fallout is spreading. We're talking a mass exodus at the top. The CEO, 3 directors, 2 senior execs, all resigned. Shipping companies are starting to turn down contracts. At one point, even Microsoft briefly cut their IT services. The entire system that supports this company is starting to crack under the pressure. Okay, so let's zoom out for a second. The really crucial thing to understand here is that what's happening to Nayara, it's like a perfect little model of the huge problem that India itself is facing. It's this incredible high-stakes tightrope walk, stuck between an amazing economic gift on one side and a complete political nightmare on the other. And this really breaks down that impossible choice. On one side, you've got the European Union. That's India's #2 trading partner and a really important strategic ally, especially when it comes to China. But on the other side, you have Russia, a historic political and military partner, and right now, the supplier of all that cheap oil that India's economy is thirsty for. You can see how they're being pulled in completely opposite directions. So you might be wondering, why is India even willing to take this kind of risk? Well, the government's stance is pretty simple and direct. They say their #1, first and foremost priority is keeping the lights on and the fuel flowing for more than 1 billion people. For a country that size, affordable energy isn't just nice to have, it's an absolute necessity. And all of this leaves us with one big critical question. As the world keeps pushing countries to pick a side, how long can India really afford to walk this incredibly narrow middle path? How long can they balance their own economic needs against these massive geopolitical pressures? That's the real tightrope here, and you can bet the whole world is watching to see if they can make it to the other side.